So the recording has started. That's the trigger to start. All right, thank you for joining us. Hopefully others will join soon. April 13th, and today we have Greg Ramsey all the way from Seattle joining us. And thanks, Greg, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Greg will present a session on Intune, ServiceNow, and hopefully that will result in a happy admin. But before we start, let's thank our sponsors. Without sponsors, we are not able to organize events like this, and hopefully events back on premises, so that we can invite Greg again in the Netherlands, like we did like 5-6 years ago. If you want to follow us on Twitter, Meetup, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, please do. And if you like this session or have a question, always use the WP NIAS NL hashtag so we can track this. We have a couple of upcoming events. Next week we have an Ask Me Anything live with Ronnie and Frans with David Geyer, all about expediting Windows 10 quality updates with Microsoft Endpoint Manager. In 2 weeks, it's my turn to share 10 practical tips to secure your corporate data with Microsoft 365. And on the 11th of May, we have Nico Ziek sharing 5 biggest technical hiccups when moving to the cloud. And if you want to speak for yourself or speak at our user group or at the Workplace NIAS Summit in August, submit your session here for our user group and look for Twitter for the summit in August. If you have a nice subject to talk about, if you want to present, we're happy to help you. If you're not that experienced, if you are experienced, of course you will have a seat in one of our next events. With that, yeah, the floor is yours, Greg. Old picture, I need to update it.
Yes, I need to get another business suit picture. I don't have one yet. So
exactly.
yeah, I've been on a low carb frenzy over the last year. So yeah, I've changed a little since that picture. All right. You want me to go ahead and share?
Yep.
All right, let me hit my screen share. And hello, everyone. Thank you for your time today. As Peter mentioned, I'm in Seattle, Washington. Although my background is from Florence, Italy, one of the places I enjoy and miss because I haven't been able to go there in a while. But yeah, so I'm coming to you. It's 7 a.m. here in Seattle. Don't worry, I've had about 3 cups of coffee and I have been working since about 5. So it's been early mornings for me because I normally work with our central time zone teams. So hopefully you can see my screen. Intune plus ServiceNow, a happy admin. I have a handful of slides and a lot of demos. Feel free as we go. Let me bring up here on my second monitor so I can see Teams. If I see questions along the way, I'll address them, or Peter or whomever, feel free to speak up or mention, or otherwise, where appropriate, I'll pause and ask and go from there. We are recording this, so this will be available later. I do have some links in this as well because I've recorded my demos. So the PowerPoint also has some links to the specific demos, but they'll be captured here as well. So we'll see how that works with recording resolution, but if you need it, you'll be able to get to the original links as well. Okay, so here we go. Intune plus ServiceNow, a happy admin. I guess let me give you just a little more background about me if you're not familiar with me. I'm a long-time configuration manager guy back to SMS 1.2 days. And so I've been in this space for a long time, but I really grew with the product. And about 5 years ago, I moved into a different role within inside of Dell and focused on enterprise tools and strategy. So really looking at what we called management and monitoring automation, IT asset management, IT service management, all those pieces for Dell IT, which we call Dell Digital. So I might say that every now and then. But so throughout the last 5 years, I've been really looking to tie those things together, and that's when I really started working with ServiceNow. And then over the last 2 years, my focus has been more in our managed services space. So I'm still in IT, but I'm an enterprise architect for our managed services space. I'm helping basically um, tie together the IT that's required to support our managed services customers. So in all of those areas, I still work a little bit with Intune. I work a lot with ServiceNow, but I work with a lot of other tools, right, and how they tie together. But today our focus is Intune and ServiceNow, and hopefully making a happier admin. So the perspective that I'm going at this today is you know nothing or very little about ServiceNow, and I'm going to show you enough to be dangerous, right? To show you how easy it is to start integrating between Intune and ServiceNow. So we're going to be using a bit with Logic Apps today and a couple other things, and integrating with ServiceNow to get some of that Intune data and some automation flowing between Intune and ServiceNow. Okay, so a very quick agenda. This is demo heavy, so we'll spend a lot of time talking through demos and see where it goes, see what questions you have as we go. So here's our high level goal for the day. There's several services, several clouds here that we're working with. Primarily, we're working between ServiceNow and Logic Apps, and reaching into Graph to get some data from Intune. So you'll see a bit of this in action as we go today. But our goal is to get an automation or get multiple automations between the things that you see here on the screen. So why are we doing all this? It's all about automation, right? At the end of the day, we want to try to reduce the time for any type of resolution, any type of delay in a customer getting what they need, trying to resolve issues. All of those things tie into this, and automation is key to all of that. And of course, reducing human error. The more we can get what I call machine fact data, the less chance there are of humans fat fingering it, right? So when possible, I try to go to data sources and pull data and put data directly where it needs to be, instead of relying on humans to key in or copy paste and things like that. So those are some key reasons why we want to talk about this type of automation today. I do want to mention just a word or two on security. Today, I'm going to go pretty open. You'll see we're going to use some basic authentication and some webhooks and things like that. But both the platforms that we're primarily working with today, right, between Logic Apps, of course, Graph, and ServiceNow, they are all very mature. Speak with your security teams to talk about what types of authentication you should be using between your tools, right? OAuth is a very popular one and is used. I use a little bit of that today. Maybe in the future, if we have a separate session talking more on ServiceNow, I can give a little more detail on using ServiceNow and leveraging those types of credentials. But today, you're going to see some basic credentials and some out-of-the-box connectors using Logic Apps to connect to ServiceNow. All right, just another slide or two, and then we're going to get into some demos. So a couple just hot tips, and I'm going to show you a ServiceNow developer instance, right? ServiceNow is a SaaS-based product. There are some corner cases where you can bring it on-prem, but it's by and large, it's a SaaS-based product. And ServiceNow has done a very good job of basically giving anyone that wants one what they call a developer instance. So you can very quickly go out to ServiceNow and register and get up and running with the developer instance in a matter of minutes. And I'm going to show you a little bit of that today. And I'm going to show you a little bit of how even to just use PowerShell connecting to that ServiceNow instance, because it's if you're not familiar with it at all, just a few little crumbs will help you start your journey here. So I'm going to show you a little bit of that in our first demo or two today, and then we'll get into some of the specifics around Intune and integrations that way. But it's very easy to get up and running and make standard API calls to ServiceNow. All right, so here's a word on our demos. You see, we've got 5 demos here. We're gonna roll through pretty quickly. We're gonna talk through getting your developer instance. We're gonna have a quick demo on basically configuring the permissions that we need today for ServiceNow and Graph, and then we're gonna get into the meat of our demos. So we're gonna go through a scenario of basically taking your devices in Intune and getting them into your ServiceNow CMDB and asset. So both configuration management and asset management databases. We're going to talk through a scenario of enriching a ServiceNow incident with device information. So the scenario could be, all right, a customer calls in, say they have a problem, they select their device, and all of a sudden we perform automation to go get some data from Intune and enrich that incident, right? That'll help the service desk or whomever perform troubleshooting without having to go hunt and pick and collect data themselves. And then we're going to briefly talk on initiating device actions, right? Like triggering a shutdown or triggering, a log off or a lock or something like that. Depending on time, we'll hit that one kind of quickly. Okay, last slide here before our first demo. So as mentioned, I'll give the slide deck to Peter and team, so you guys will have the links in it, and we can also post those another way if needed. But basically, this bright green color you have here is a hyperlink to getting to ServiceNow for the developer instance. We're going to show you a little bit today on getting the instance, activating plugins. I did want to call out that these instances, right, they are free. There's 2 things that are special about them. They do go into a hibernation. So like if you stop using them for, I don't know what the timeout is, let's say 12 hours or something like that, they do go into a hibernation, and then the next time you try to log in, it just needs to spin up again. So it comes out of hibernation. It takes a couple minutes. No big deal for a developer instance, but if you're trying to make API calls while it's hibernated, obviously those things could fail. So just keep that in mind when you're performing automation. And the other thing is that if you go 10 days without actually logging in or using your developer instance, it does get reclaimed, so that you would have to basically reprovision a new one. There is some time where the data is backed up and you can restore it, but basically just don't keep anything in the instance that you can't afford to lose. And they do have some documentation on how you can take anything you customized and export it to GitHub or other things. But at a high level, for me, I just go spin up an instance when I need it. If I have an instance and I want to keep what's in there, you do get some warning notifications a few days ahead of time. So just go out and log into the instance to keep it running, type of thing. But just keep that in mind as you're using it. It's not an instance that's up and running 24/7, 365 for your use. It's free, so use it and you'll have it. Don't use it and it'll go away. Okay, first demo. Just use a couple screenshots and we'll show these as we go through. But basically, we actually this is the second demo. I guess I lost my all. This is my first one. Getting your ServiceNow dev instance. So let's go to demo now. All right, I'm just going to talk through this. This is just a maybe 6 minutes. I might speed up through parts of it here as we go. So basically, we're just logged into ServiceNow and we're going to request an instance. ServiceNow labels their versions by cities. So you can see Paris and Quebec here. Quebec is the latest. I chose Paris as part of this effort. But basically, you see here in the middle left, it says fulfilling your request. Within a few seconds, sometimes it takes a few minutes, but you get a developer instance. You get a URL here. You'll need this URL as we go. So grab that and grab the admin password, because you're going to need that to get into your instance later. If you do it from the UI here, you can just click it and it actually passes it on the command line so that you can quickly log into the instance here. But once you have this information, you'll see we'll open up the instance here and we'll do a few first run things. And we got a little bit of drag here. These are developer instances. They're not, it's on a shared stack, but overall it runs pretty well. Okay, so now that we're in here, we're basically at the home page of ServiceNow, and you can think of this as an admin view, right? So you logged in as an admin, you have full rights here as we go. There are, and you can see there the status is online. There are these things in ServiceNow called plugins. So you get a base instance of ServiceNow, which is highly functional, but we're actually going to add what's called the Enterprise Hub, the Integration Hub, the Enterprise Pack of the Integration Hub. And you can see there's some integrations for SCCM and some other things here as well. But take a look at these. Any of these that have Integration Hub, there are additional costs for those. Some of the things we'll do today will use those, not all of the things though. So it's kind of like everything else in the world today, right? You have a no or low code type of option. If you choose that, you end up paying a little bit more per transaction or other things. Or you can go back to JScript or something like that and do some, I'll call it deeper programming, right, for free on your instance. So we're going to use some low code today. Okay, so installing plugins actually takes longer than what I showed there. It's actually the slowest part of the process, so I snipped that out here in part of the demo. But now there's other plugins as well that can be enabled once you've enabled that plugin on the outside of your instance. So depending on the type of plugin you need, you might do it within ServiceNow once you're logged in, or you might do it on the outside of ServiceNow. But I just wanted to give you a quick view. So you got 1,240 results here. And if you just do some quick searches, you'll find all types of plugins for third-party apps. So third-party being things with Azure, other tools as well. There's several tools. One of the things that we learned inside of Dell, right? Once we migrated to ServiceNow, people started looking in the ServiceNow store, and of course, every company wants to have a checkbox that say that they integrate with ServiceNow. So you'll find a lot of plugins out there. Some of them good, some of them, maybe they need some work. But take a look, because there's a lot of plugins. Depending on the plugin, you can see here. Let me pause it quickly. You can see here some are free, some are not. So you can just see that as you're searching for plugins. All right, so now I want to show you the REST API Explorer. This is something that you get as part of the base platform as well. So in this REST API Explorer, this is where you can get to all the API documentation and all the out-of-the-box native functionality you have with APIs with ServiceNow. And it's very wizard-driven here. So I'm just going to give you a couple examples and show you how to throw that in PowerShell so that you can do some automation that way as well. So in this example, we're going to retrieve records from a table, and you see we're selecting the incident table. So think about creating or listing incidents. Whenever you're using the REST API Explorer, you get a limit on the number of return results. So that's why I selected 10. And you basically hit submit, right? And you've got the information here. It's really easy though to take this data and throw it into PowerShell and actually get a PowerShell script that you can take and run with. So just clicking on PowerShell, you get a sample snippet. So we're going to just grab this snippet and we're going to throw it into PowerShell ISE. And we're just going to update this username password. And there's just one more thing we need to do to the script. And then we actually have a functioning script for using PowerShell to integrate with ServiceNow. So pretty powerful, pretty easy to get up and running pretty quick. So I just ran that script. And I need to tell it to show me the response result. And we can do a little more here. Did a measure, so you can see I got 10 incidents returned. Just a quick pause, you can see my URI. So you can see my ServiceNow instance. This is the specific instance for your company, or this is for our developer instance that we're using for this demo. But you can see we're getting to the incident table, and you see here we're passing the sysparam limit. So this just means limit your results to 10. You can remove that, right, and get whatever number of results you'd like. So real quick, just a quick enumeration of incidents, just to show you the power of using PowerShell and the sample code that they have. Similarly, we can create incidents as well. So now you can see we just switched over to create a record. I'm going to go back to incident as well. You can do this with any out-of-the-box table in ServiceNow, by the way, so there's quite a bit of power here. So we're just basically going to build our payload. So I'm going to select a couple fields. Just to call out, ServiceNow out of the box, everybody may try to use it out of the box, but everybody makes configuration changes for ServiceNow, such as required fields and things like that. So as your developer instance will have the out of the box functionality, but if you try to leverage this within your company, there may be different required fields and things like that. So you'll have to work with your ServiceNow team to better understand, what types of fields and values and things like that are required. So just keep that in mind as you go through things here. We just get a warning because we're actually doing a post this time, so we can hit OK. And very quickly, we get a status 201, so we're able to see that we successfully posted. Very similar here with PowerShell. We can grab that code snippet, and we can get up and running and actually using PowerShell to create incidents within ServiceNow. And as I mentioned, right, this is more automation in general, right? How you could take this into other things, Azure automation or functions or other things. I just wanted to show it here to make sure you're aware of the power. Everything else after this will step out of PowerShell, and we're going to be using low, no code types of options here to build out our automations. Yes, and feel free to post any questions along the way here, and I'll stop demo and answer or tell you I'll address them later or whatever. So that's real quick to create an incident. And let's see, I'm just going to advance the rest of this real quick to see if there's anything else I need to show you here before we move on. So we'll take a quick look here at incidents, and we can see the incident that was created. You can see Greg's favorite server down, and we got some high level information. Now, since we called it via API, you can see there was actually a required field here for caller that wasn't required when we made the API call. So just keep those things in mind as well. You might need to add additional fields to ensure that you are doing the right thing for your company. A lot of companies will do incident routing based on parameters, right, that are filled in. So if you don't follow the rules for your company, things may not route as expected. So just keep that in mind with what you do here. So that's a very quick overview on just getting started, right? Getting in and creating your developer instance. Let's go back and let's go to our next demo. All right, so now we're going to basically, now that we have a ServiceNow instance, I'm going to assume you already have Azure and you have your resources there. You already have Intune. So we're going to go in and basically configure our permissions so that we can launch these automations between the tools. This is just a screenshot. We'll walk through creating and setting these permissions as we go here. All right, so here we are back in ServiceNow. And this requires administrative rights. There's all kinds of different roles and rights. Since you're on your developer instance, right, you have full administrative rights here. So we're just going to go in and we're going to create a new user. And we're just going to give it a service account name. This demo, my text is a little small. I promise you in my next ones, it gets a little bigger. I just didn't have time to go back and create this one before our meeting. So sorry for the small text in this one. But we basically create a username and password. Once that's created, we're going to go in and we're going to grant some rights. You see here, there's a box that says web service access only. That just basically prevents this user from logging into the user interface. So that's something we can do to make this basically an API account. And then we basically need to go in and grant it the rights within ServiceNow. So there's this role called REST API access, so they can make the API calls. And then I'm going to give it what's called the ITIL role so that they can do standard ITIL processes, right? Creating an incident, creating incident problem change, updating incidents. We're not going to deal with problem or change today, but that's just one of the roles you get. Okay, so now we're in Intune, in Endpoint Manager Admin Center. So we go into all services and M365 Azure Active Directory. We're actually going to go into Azure Active Directory and we're going to register an application. So we're going to create a new registration. We're going to give it a friendly name. And then once we create this, we'll go delegate some rights. Well, first, while we're here, we are going to grab the client ID and the tenant because we're going to need those for OAuth a little bit later. So grab those and put those in your clipboard or put them in Notepad. So now we view API permissions. We need to delegate some rights. Now, depending on what you want to do, there's different rights that you need to give here. We're going to do some gets and some sets. We're going to give a little more rights than just read. You can see we're going in and selecting graph, and we're giving application permissions here. If we type in device management, manage devices, then we get to the section that we're looking for. And there's a couple that we're going to set in here. There's one that says perform user impacting remote actions, and then there's read Microsoft Intune devices. I selected both of those, and then we're going to select just one or two more here. We need to be able to read Active Directory, so I hit directory read all. Now you notice here it says not granted, so I just clicked grant admin consent, and then you get a confirmation box. Now we've got green on the screen so that we have granted admin consent there. So now we're ready to roll on that. All right, so we've granted access. Now we need to create our client secret so that we can actually connect via API. So we're going to create a new client secret, give it a descriptive name, give it an expiration time. Once that's complete, then we're going to get a client secret. You can see here, there's the value. Copy it while it's here, because once you leave the page, you don't get it back. So grab that, throw that in Notepad so you have it for later as well. And we're done with configuring our rights. So that's pretty quick. Like I said, it's recorded here, so you'll be able to go back and view that as you go. We want to spend the time here getting into the meat of our demos, though. All right, so this first real demo, this is where we actually have the scenario of, our goal, right, is to have devices in ServiceNow from Intune. So think about the scenario where you have devices you've enrolled in Intune, but you want them to appear inside of ServiceNow so that when somebody creates an incident or maybe asset tracking and other things, you want to get this information into ServiceNow so that you can perform additional operations on it. What I'm going to show you today is pretty basic, just a handful of fields, but you'll be able to see how you can quickly expand on that. There are some gotchas. I'll call out a couple of those along the way. And again, back to your instance of ServiceNow and whatever the requirements are for your company, certain things may have to change, but to get things up and running, this will show you the art of the possible, right? And definitely show you how you can get this up and running in a ServiceNow developer instance. But I'll call out a couple of things along the way. Okay, so here's our basic flow, right? So we're going to use logic apps with a daily schedule for this one. So just in the example today, we're going to basically say daily, we're going to perform this operation. We're going to go query manage devices. We're going to query graph to get that list of what our managed devices are. And then we're just going to insert those devices into what's called a transform map in ServiceNow. Now, a transform map is basically a way for us to load data in a way that is pretty safe, because you can have business rules, you can have required fields, required attributes, you can have required data types, you can accept or reject, and you can even do some coalescing, right? So if a record already exists, merge it with an existing record as opposed to creating a new record. So ServiceNow takes some of that pain out so that we don't have to build any logic in, because it's there natively, or you can work with your team and create additional business logic. Basically, all we need is the API endpoint to be able to do this. So we're going to use logic apps to insert that record, and then we're going to use ServiceNow to basically process that transform map and coalesce to put that data into our CMDB. And CMDB and asset, those are different tables in ServiceNow, but they're married together. They actually, you can kind of think of them as piggybacking on each other. When you make a change in one, it can impact the other and vice versa, right? So if you decom an asset, for example, it could take it out of commission in CMDB. So generally speaking, when you create an asset, you also get a CMDB record unless somebody has broken the out-of-the-box rules of ServiceNow. All right, so let's go back to demo. And again, feel free if you have any questions here, bring those up. Okay, so here we are inside of inside of Azure. We're going to create a logic app. And we're just going to walk through this scenario. If you're new to logic app, I highly recommend you spend some time there. This low code, no code type of experience, you'll see a little bit of this on the ServiceNow side as well, right? ServiceNow has their own implementation of low code. So the things I'm showing you, depending on your expertise, your team's expertise, you may decide to do it on one side or the other. Some things you have to do natively in one tool or the other, but there's definitely right tool for job, right, and leveraging what you own as well. So we're basically going to create this new logic app. We're going to set it to start to run on our recurrence. And we're going to go in and basically set some parameters here so that we can make that OAuth connection. This is basically our connection information to connect a graph that we captured a little while ago. I'm throwing these in parameters here for now. So basically, my client ID, my secret, and my tenant ID, I'll set here, and then I'll just use those throughout my script. Once I have set these, then I'll go back and we'll get into the meat on the script. All right, I need to set this interval to 1. For some reason, when I first go in and set and select for recurrence, it doesn't allow me to change to 3. I have to go do something else and then come back to change that interval. But I am going to create an HTTP webhook here. Or actually, I lied. We're doing an HTTP request here. So this is basically going into Graph. Let me pause this for just a second. So we're going into Graph API Explorer so that we can basically run these commands, get an example payload so I can use this for building out what I want to do inside of Logic Apps. So you can see here, I'm using the beta release, but I'm going into device management and listing my managed devices. And you can just basically see I'm scrolling through and it's returned a couple devices in my test instance of Intune. So let's grab that URI. And this is where I'm going to make my HTTP request, and it's a GET method. I need to add some additional information here. I need to tell it that I want the data in JSON. So I add my headers for content type application JSON. And then I think other than that, I think I'm just going to add authentication information. I'm going to set my authentication type to OAuth here. I've used managed identity in other scenarios, but for some reason I was having trouble here. So today I've used OAuth for my connection. So you see I specify my tenant, my client ID, and secret, and then my audience is just graph.microsoft.com. So that's all I need to be able to make this REST call. I'm going to show you a little bit about how I work through building a logic app. I like to fail fast, so I don't build a lot of steps at a time. I go through and quickly run steps as I go so that I can see my results, maybe even grab a payload so that I can, continue through my process. But basically, I made this run and I got a successful call right to Graph to get my information. So I got my list of devices here. So now I'm ready to take that list of devices and leverage that here to build the rest of my logic app. So first, I'm going to parse my JSON so that I can prepare to do my inserts to ServiceNow. So I need to reference the body from that previous call, and I'm going to use a sample payload, which is the one I copied from whenever I made that sample run. So now I've got a sample payload. So that'll give me my JSON so that I can make my ServiceNow call. And I did that kind of quick there. Let me just go back just a little bit. And I'll pause this. So ServiceNow is available as a logic app. So you get that for free out of the box. This first time configuring it, we go through a couple extra steps to set the connection, but it's kind of weird how it works here. So I'm selecting ServiceNow, and then I'm selecting the action I want to perform. Now, as I mentioned, we're using an import set and a transform map into ServiceNow. So technically, every time we are going to create a record, even if that record exists inside of ServiceNow, we're going to use ServiceNow rules to actually coalesce. So every time, it doesn't matter whether the device already exists in ServiceNow or not, we're actually going to tell it to coalesce on the serial number, and you'll see that when we get into ServiceNow. So every time we run this, we're going to say create record because it's creating it basically in an import table so that ServiceNow can process it. So we say create record. Now you see the first time I do this, it doesn't look like a create record UI. And let me go back again. I'm hitting the wrong button to pause. It's going to ask us for a connection name and a little bit more information for an instance name, and then your username and password to be able to connect to ServiceNow. So I'm just going to jump over to ServiceNow and grab that information. So I'm going to go to ServiceNow. Actually, I'm going to show you Transform Map here real quick, and then we'll grab that information. So in Transform Map, we're actually going to be hitting this table called Computer, and you can see the actual name of the table is Import Computer. If we look at that map, you'll see the fields, and it'll make a little more sense whenever we go through this inside of Logic Apps, because we'll actually map information to the fields here. So there's a limited set of fields that you can map to, and we're just going to select a handful of those today. I'm going to do a little trick here in ServiceNow. You can see here on the URL, I've changed it to the table name that I want to see. So this IMP underscore computer underscore list.do. This will basically give me the list view of IMP computer table. So that's my import table. And you'll see that it's going to be blank here for now. But once we run our Logic app, you'll see that we're actually creating records in this table. All right, so back to creating our connection. We grab this information from ServiceNow. That's our developer instance. So I just put that as the name. You could technically use whatever you want, but I just put that in as the name. And then I add my username and my password that has rights into ServiceNow. It's actually going to establish a connection right now. So if this step fails, you'll know you have a connectivity issue. But you can see now it says we're connected to that instance. Okay, so now we're going to say create record. And when we create record, it's a little weird here. It does show you all the tables in ServiceNow that you have access to with your credentials. Similar to that REST API Explorer that I showed you in ServiceNow, you basically have all the tables available to you. Now it shows you a friendly name here, and you see two that are listed as computer, which is confusing. One of these is the actual computer table inside of CMDB, which is our destination. That's where all the data will land. But we actually want to put data in the import computer table because we want ServiceNow to process that data before it puts it in the computer table. So it's a little obscure when you look through this. I just know from experience that it's the second one here. Technically, you could select this and then you could go do a peek code and you could tell that it's going to the IMP underscore table in ServiceNow. I don't think I showed that here, but basically you select the table. You could also tell by the attributes because the attribute set or the parameters are different for each one. With this set, there's this thing called transform map, and that only exists on my transform map table, does not exist on my computer table. So that's just another hint. But basically, this is all the attributes that I was showing you in the ServiceNow view just a little bit ago. All right, so now we're going to basically select the attributes that we want to create inside of that import table. So we're going to select just a handful of attributes here. So manufacturer, operating system, I think we get the name and the serial number, maybe one or two others here. So you can just see I'm selecting these. Another hot tip here, these are case sensitive, which is kind of weird. So just if you're not finding something, spend a little more time, type it in differently, and then you'll see them appear. Basically, and let me just show you that step again because that went really fast as well. We're starting our mapping here at this point. So you can see we've selected the manufacturer field, and now we're going to go pull that data out of JSON. And when I type it in here, there's actually two levels of manufacturer in the JSON. I'm going to pick the one that's on the outside level. That's the first one that's shown here. But when I select this, you'll see that things change inside of Logic Apps. If you're new to Logic Apps, that'll be something that'll be a little shocking for you. But basically what's happening is that our JSON, basically when we did our parse, Logic App realizes that this is an array. So you could have multiple devices handed to you in this process. So we basically make a for each loop, or Logic Apps actually does it for you. Basically, it's going to tell us you selected something within an array, therefore we're going to make this a for each loop because that's probably really what you want here. So let's let this continue. So you can see when we do this, all of a sudden it adds a for each loop. We get a little pop-up up here. I don't know if it'll appear here, but you'll normally see a pop-up whenever you do this, because basically it put my create record inside this and it made a for each on the value so that we can enumerate the array. Yeah, there's a little pop-up. So based on parameters, we've added a for each. So now we can populate the rest of the fields here. So we're just going to select the few here that we need. Serial number is key. You're going to see we're going to coalesce off a serial number. And of course, I'm not doing any checks here as well, which in your, production code you may want to. So we're going to just save this logic app, and then we're ready to run this thing. You'll see this run end to end here. We're going to go to graph. We're going to list all of our devices that are managed, and then we're going to go push those into ServiceNow. And we did it within just a matter of a few seconds here. So you can see this ran. We got green check marks, so that's happy. And you can see here the record type is IMP computer. And then as we enumerate this out, you can see the data fields as well. Let me just back this up a little bit so you can see it again. Yeah, so you can see the data fields here in the body. So this is the information that we basically push to ServiceNow. Okay, so now if we go into ServiceNow and we refresh this page, this is the import table, and you see we have 2 records, and you can see that they have a state of inserted. So you have the names, you have manufacturers, operating system serial numbers. So that was pretty quick, right? We were able to get data into ServiceNow just using logic apps, pulling data from graph. So we got this into ServiceNow, and again, we're just using the out-of-the-box ServiceNow rules. And now I just duplicated my tab here because we're going to go look at the workstations table, which really is the computer table behind the scenes. And you can see that here in the URL. That's just another hot tip. CMDB CI computer is the actual name of the table behind the scenes, and underscore list means show it in a list view. But you can see I've got 2 computers here that have been created. Let's see. Oh, I was going to add created, but I already had the created field there. But you can see here they were just created. So that's pretty slick, pretty quick to get that data into ServiceNow. If I run this again, the way it's built, right, Logic Apps is going to perform the same process each time. So it's not looking for anything. You could add more smarts on your REST query to graph if you wanted, right? You could look for things and see if they've changed or whatever. But you can see here, basically, with our import computer, we did get a response from ServiceNow basically saying no field values changed. And you'll see when we go into ServiceNow, nothing changed. So basically that means it didn't see any changes. And I kind of flew by it, but on our import set, it does coalesce on serial number. So basically what that means is since we created a new record with serial number, it will look up in ServiceNow to see if there's an existing record with serial number and then do a field matching and update. And since there were no fields to update, you can see it says no fields changed. And then again, we go back in ServiceNow. If we go back to our import, you see we did get 2 new records because every time our logic app runs, it will add records here. They'll automatically get purged later, but it adds them to this temporary table. And you can see inserted and ignored. They're slightly not in sorted order, so I sort them here real quickly. Now you can see these top 2 were ignored. Now, if one of the fields had changed, it would have went ahead and updated the target record, but it knew that the record was the same as one that already existed based on the serial number. All right, so that's a quick scenario of getting data into Intune, right? So that's pretty huge from a CMDB and asset type of perspective. And I flew through it here, showing you kind of light speed, but with a day's worth of work or a few hours worth of work with somebody that has expertise in both Graph and in ServiceNow, you could get some up and running functionality here. And certainly in a test instance, you can get that up and running very quickly. All right. So next, let's see. Did I click one too many? I think I did. Yeah. All right. So let's walk through this now. So now let's enrich an incident in ServiceNow with information from Intune, right? So the scenario is a user created an incident, right? They went to ServiceNow and they said, I can't find my applications, right? Or something isn't working as expected. Well, when they do that, your ServiceNow instance, there's several ways that a ticket could be created. I'm going to show you kind of the ugliest way. It's kind of using basic standard forms that are out of the box. There is a user portal that has better experience and things like that. I won't show you that today, but bottom line, at the end of the day, you get an incident in ServiceNow that has a user and a selected computer, right? You could allow them to select that as part of their ticketing process, right? They could select a computer they're having problems with, or you could automatically associate it in the background, right? ServiceNow, depending on how assets are tied to computers, you could automatically do that. Okay, so here we're going to talk about enriching a ServiceNow incident with device information from Intune. So in this example, we're going to basically trigger an action anytime an incident is created in ServiceNow, right? So anytime an incident is created in ServiceNow, we're going to send a trigger to Logic Apps so that we can then basically enrich that ticket. So we'll do something first just to kind of log inside of the ticket that we're performing actions using Logic Apps. So we're going to basically say Logic Apps automation is running, and then we're going to then do a query to get additional device data. And then we'll go update that information in ServiceNow so that the information is there so that your service desk can look at it. You could perform additional automations from there if you wanted to. I'm just going to show you a really quick, quick and dirty dump of data from JSON, but you'll get the idea, right? That you could parse that out and put it in fields or do anything else there that you would like. Okay, so let's move through this demo of enriching data. Okay, so we're going to create a new Logic app. The way I work through this is I create basically my stub Logic app with my webhook. I get my webhook information, and then I go into ServiceNow and build out how I call that hook, and you'll kind of see how I build out from there. So I just creating a Logic app, calling it enrich incident, and once I have that created, then we're going to go in and we're going to create the webhook for it. Takes just a few seconds to actually deploy. So you can see we selected when an HTTP request is received. So I'm just going to save that because all of a sudden we get our webhook URL. You can see there, and we're going to copy it. I'm going to try to avoid pausing this time just because we're running on time. This is the longest demo, and then I have a quick one after this as well. So now that we have that webhook URL, we're going to go into ServiceNow, and we're going to use what's called flow in ServiceNow. And there's two parts of ServiceNow in flow that we're going to use, and I will pause it for this. There's something called an action, and there's something called, I think it's just called a flow. Think of an action as a modular component, and flows are kind of a parent, and you'll see how we use both of those. So right now I'm creating kind of the inner piece, which will actually make the webhook call. So I'm kind of building this kind of in a reverse engineering. I created the webhook. Now I'm going to create the action that calls the webhook, and then I'm going to create the flow that will actually trigger on the action. So I just give it a catchy name. Here I call it Enrich Incident 2. I have some inputs for that, and what I'm going to add here is what's called a sysid. Think of this as a unique identifier. This is a unique identifier for anything that's in ServiceNow. So in this example, it's for an incident, but it could be for anything. I'm just showing you the out-of-the-box steps that can be done here. So you can do a ton on platform. And then you also have this section for integrations. I selected REST here. You could also select PowerShell. There's some caveats with that, but here we're just doing REST, right? Because we're doing SaaS to SaaS calls. Here I'm creating my connection to that webhook. I said to create an inline connection. I'm going to separate out my webhook to a base URL and then a resource path. You can see what I'm doing here, grabbing that information. Again, I know I'm going through this quickly. Go back and watch the recording, and you'll be able to pause this along the way. So you can see here I selected it's an HTTP post. I'm going to add my header information to tell the content type. And then I'm going to make a very small payload. So I'm going to create a very small JSON payload here. SysID, here's the magic you get in ServiceNow, right? So this SysID here is the input variable. That's what we created just a little bit ago in our inputs. You'll see how we pass to that on the outside of this with a flow in just a few minutes. But I'm going to drag and drop that so that I have it quoted here in the JSON, right? So that'll be passed as part of my parameters. So this is a very basic action. I'm going to go in and do a quick test on it. You can just hit test up there and then type in the parameter requirement. I put a very generic SysID because just we want to go over in Logic Apps and confirm we actually received it. So if I go into Logic Apps, I can see that it ran. And you can see here I got a payload test SysID. So that's great. We have a payload. So that means we're connected to Logic Apps, which is great. You have to save and you have to publish. Hot tip, a few times I've forgotten to publish, and then you got to spend time going and researching to try to figure out why something isn't working. So just remember to go publish. And then you see that execution button there. You can also use that to see how many, when this is running, troubleshoot. But now we're going to create that flow, which is the wrapper, right, around this action. So the flow is where we actually create the trigger, right? So how this flow actually, when this flow launches. So I'm just calling it the same here, enrich incident. So I'm going to create this trigger. We'll skip the tour, but you can see here I can add a trigger. Now this trigger is based on anything that happens in ServiceNow. I said I was going to try to not back up, but I think it's important. So I'll back up. So you can see there are several triggers that we can do here within ServiceNow. A lot of times it'll be based on some record created or updated, and you'll see we can go into further detail. We can look at specific fields and set criteria on every one of these. There's a ton of power here, right? So you can basically trigger actions, trigger automations based on any type of field change inside of ServiceNow. You can also make scheduled types of runs. You can even create REST API endpoints as well, right? So something could trigger to your flow here from external, right? So that scenario of having, for example, Logic Apps make a call to ServiceNow is something that you could do here as well. All right, so this trigger is going to be based on a record being created. So it's on an incident record. So I'm going to select the incident table. And then I'm going to add a condition here. And this is very flexible. Basically, this is another example of the power of ServiceNow. We're doing some dot walking here, right? So I'm on incident. I haven't shown you this yet, but when you create an incident, we can select a configuration item or a computer, for example, that I'm having a problem with. So you can see that we're saying on the incident table, look at configuration item, but we're going to go in further and we're going to look at a specific field inside a configuration item, because that's what we want to see is when that is changed. So the configuration item name, right? Whenever that is, oh, actually, sorry, that's my criteria. So when it's not empty, we want to be able to do this, because an incident can be created out of the box without a configuration item. That your mileage might vary on your company, but depending on the type of incident, you may or may not have this. So in production, you might have additional criteria, but at minimum for us, we want to make sure configuration item has a name. Otherwise, we don't have anything we can go query, right, from a device. You could put more around this, but for us, we're just going to say configuration item is not empty. So that's our trigger. So anytime an instance created where the name is not empty, now we're going to go perform an action. We could put a lot more logic in here, but for this is very basic. We're just going to call our enrich incident action. And you can see here, enrich incident 2. We select this, and there's that parameter that I created on the action. And you can see over here on the right-hand side, I'm scrolling through all the fields inside of incident, which is pretty slick. Again, back to drag and drop, but you actually are looking at the incident object and any related, any references you see here. There's a drill down by the arrows. So this is how you can drill in to those, related objects and get metadata from there. We're just grabbing SysID for this. We want to be pretty generic in the data that we're sending to Logic Apps and a webhook. So we're just going to send that. Okay, so now we can run another test here if we'd like. We won't just yet, because I want to give it a real incident sysid so that it can run some more work from there. So we can go ahead and activate this, save and activate. You don't publish on these, which is weird. You publish on an action, you don't publish on a flow. So just something that you'll learn the hard way as well. Hopefully you'll get my hot tip and shortcut that. So let's create an incident. We want to see this part work, right? We're going to create an incident in the UI. Again, there are several ways this could be done, but this is the most basic and out of the box way. So basically, I'm creating an incident. I have to specify the caller because that's a required field out of the box. And then I'm selecting a configuration item, right? I'm selecting a specific PC. This is one of the PCs we actually just imported with our previous example. So I selected this, this desktop here that's actually managed by Intune. So I select that item and I'm going to put in a short description. Can't install applications on my device. We've probably all heard that once or twice, right? And of course, it's very urgent, so we'll mark that critical and let this be submitted here. So once that's submitted, now our backend processes happen. So you see we have this incident. We're going to go look at this flow and we're going to look at executions and we'll see that this is run. And it ran pretty quick. You can see on the right, you can see that it completed, so that's great. We're going to step into this a little bit further. This is where you can debug and troubleshoot these flows. You can see the APIs that were called. You can see the parameters that were passed. We got a 202 here, so everything's good. We made that call successfully. So now let's go look in Logic Apps and let's see what we received. All right, so we got a sysid. So now let's grab this body of this JSON because we're going to use this to build out the rest of our Logic app. And this is, now that we've got the data, right, now we can do a bunch of iterations inside of Logic Apps. So we're going to edit our incident, or our enrich incident Logic app. Use a sample payload. Again, it's very basic. That's what we're going to use here. So we've got our sample payload. And now we're going to start partying here. We're going to go back to ServiceNow. And this is where we're going to update the record, right? So as I mentioned, we're just basically going to add a work note where we're going to tell ServiceNow, we're going to add something there telling that we're going to perform automation. This is one of the best practices that we've done in my company, right? We basically want automation to log. That way, if a human starts to look at a ticket, they'll know that automation is running somewhere, right? So basically, you can see the parameters here that we're passing. We're saying update record. sysid is a unique identifier. That's what we passed in. We know it's on the incident table, so this will be unique to that incident. We could have said, we could have used the incident number to pass it around, but the sysid is a little more obscure, right? So we're just using that, and that's the required field when we do the update record as well. So if we had passed the incident number around, we would have had to do a get and query for the incident first. And I think I might show that in another one. I don't know if it's today or not, but if not, we'll show it in another time. But basically now we're just going to add to the work notes, and you'll see in ServiceNow where those work notes are here in just a minute. And just from a time check, I know we're at about an hour. We probably have about 10 to 15 minutes left here on the presentation and demos, just FYI. Hopefully this is informative. Feel free to throw any feedback or if you have any questions. And of course, we'll have a Q&A here at the end as well. So I just added a little here for the work notes. We are going to go ahead and get this record as well. And actually what we're doing here is we're getting the computer name. So that get the update record, right? That gets us the information, that gets the information back to the incident ticket. but we actually have to pass by reference to get the system ID, because if we were to look at the metadata from the incident, we don't actually get the system name, we get a reference to the system ID. So we have to basically say get record, and we're going to go against the computer table now to go get that information. So that's why I'm passing it the configuration item. So now we're just going to rerun, because we already have a valid incident, right, in this sys-ID that we passed when we did our first test. So we're going to rerun this. And when I refresh this page, we'll see a success here. So in 6 seconds, we completed these steps. So we did a couple things here. We updated the record, and then we also did the get, so that we basically queried CMDB. Now there's a lot of fields in CMDB. Your company won't use all of them. Your company might have additional. You'll see those here as well. But in these gets, we're getting everything, right? So you'll see a lot of empty boxes. So just keep that in mind. Doesn't mean it's bad or dirty data. It just depends on your company and what fields they're using. But we got the computer name there. So now we can continue through this. I'll show you how we updated those work notes in a little bit. Okay, so now we have a computer name. We need to go down to graph to go query to get the information about that computer. And you can see here, we have another query we're doing is manage devices, and we're passing a filter on the command line, right? So device name equals, and we're passing it a computer name there. So let's build out this step here, and you'll see this. So we're going to do a get. We're going to paste in that URI, and you can see here we have this filter equals device name equals, and we're passing it the actual computer name. Now, if as a part of our previous demo of inserting records in ServiceNow, we could have passed it the system device ID from Azure, and then we could have skipped this step, and that could be a best practice as well. We didn't implement that here, so it depends on your company and how they manage device identifiers. But if Intune, Azure are your source of record for devices, you might pass that identifier as well, right? Because names can change on computers and things like that. So you want to keep that in mind with how you do any coalescing and things like that. But for here, we're just using name. And we're going to use parameters here in logic apps for that, right? So we got name from our previous call. So we're going to use that for our call now to logic apps. So I specify my content type. And then we need to authenticate again. You can see here again, we just specify our client ID and secret and audience and tenant. All right, now we'll save this. And let's rerun this again, and we'll see that data come through. You can see it's running. Takes a few seconds longer here, but not a ton. We've got green checks, so that's a good sign. And you can see we've got data back from Graph. So that's great. So now we've got data for that device. I did a copy on that because I'm going to do a parse JSON here. Technically for this demo, I didn't have to do it because I'm actually just going to dump that payload over into the work notes inside of ServiceNow. But obviously, if I wanted to put this data into specific fields and things, I'd want to parse this data out and leverage it better. So again, we parse. I'm going to paste in my sample schema. Once we've done that, now I'm going to go ahead and update that record in ServiceNow, right? So I'm going to go back to that ticket. So I'm going to go to incident. I'm going to pass it that system ID, which is basically the sys ID that we got when we initially received the webhook. And now we're going to add again to the work notes. And as mentioned, right, you could take any of those fields that you got from the parse JSON, and you could update any field that you want. Yeah, I started to do description here, but I went ahead and changed it to work notes. Probably, depending, you might not want to overwrite the description, right? Work notes are nice because it appends. So think of a tech working on a problem, right? That's where they put notes in as they go. So basically, we're just using automation. We're adding information to the work notes. And then just adding another note here to the end. All right, so we save that off. So let's do this end to end so we can see it all in action. So I'm going to create a new ticket or new incident. I'm going to select my my system again, and I'm going to give it another short description and submit. So now in the background, everything that we put together will happen. You'll see it'll just take a few seconds. We already have a work node here. You can see where it says Logic Apps automation to enrich incident has begun. And within another 10 seconds here, then we'll see another work node added, because right now, basically, we triggered the webhook to Logic Apps. Logic Apps went back and got the name of the device. Then it queried into Graph and pulled in basically the JSON payload, right? So, PI data and everything, right? With the example we did here. But basically, we're just showing that we got all the data into the payload pretty quickly, right? Into ServiceNow, you could pull specific data out of that. You could do additional things, right? You could query. There's other things for compliance data and other things that you could query. So you could have an entire run book inside of Logic Apps that just does a series of checks against that device, right? Looks for different things via API, and then write some high-level checks or information into the ServiceNow ticket. And even go further, right? You could perform automation from there as well. So there's a ton of flexibility there. All right, so that's that. We're almost there. We're at the one more item here to mention. And I'm not going to go through a full walkthrough, but I'm just going to show you one that was already made on this one, right? So initiating a device action, right? So if you're in ServiceNow and something changes in ServiceNow, we want to be able to perform an action against that device in Intune. And I think I got a 3-minute demo here to show you on that real quickly. But you can see here, right? So we're going to look for something that changes in CMDB. In this scenario, the CMDB record has a status change to stolen, right? To signify the device is stolen, just as an example. So based on that, we're going to trigger Logic Apps to go perform an action inside of Intune, right? And then we're going to update some information in CMDB. So let's do that real quick. All right, so you can see here, we basically are passing a sys-ID and an action again. And back to, we build out our HTTP again, our endpoint to, our webhook. And you can see now we're passing in an action. Just, you'll see we can add a little more flexibility to our Logic App, right? We can make one Logic App that could manage multiple actions. So basically, we're saying where the status has been updated, right? So when a computer has been updated in CMDB and the status is set to stolen, we want to trigger this device action. And for this scenario, we're just going to reboot the device, just as an example. So we've got a payload, and we have basically a switching action inside of Logic Apps. And here's where I made my case or switch statement, right? And you can see here, we're very similar to our previous one. right? We're getting the record so that we get the actual computer name. And then we do an HTTP GET against graph on that computer name. Once we have that, we're going to parse the JSON again, right? Because we need to get some information back on that device. We actually need the device ID that we get from graph so that we can trigger the reboot. So you can see now in our HTTP here, right, we're using the ID from the parse JSON. So we queried by device name so that we could get the device ID, and then we're just calling the graph API to reboot the device. So that's how we trigger that. And then we go back and we update that record in ServiceNow. Now, the way I'm doing it here, right, we're not doing a handshake to confirm that the device received the reboot or anything like that. That would require a bit more work, but just at a high level, right? Now we're going through the demo. So either programmatically or someone goes in and they've changed a device to stolen, that would kick off our run book here. So if we refresh this, we'll see that a new execution was launched. And end to end in a matter of seconds, we were able to complete this. And we did update the description to say we initiated a device reboot. Sorry, that went pretty fast, but I know we're past time here. But this just kind of goes back and talks a little bit more about what happened in that. You can see the data and the payloads. Okay, so with that, let me flip back to slides. I know those are really quick. Hopefully that gives you an idea of the art of the possible, right? There's a ton of just functionality there, right? There's a lot of things we can do that can integrate ServiceNow and Intune, and of course leveraging graph here is what we saw today. If you have any questions, I welcome them now, or any feedback or anything else. Feel free to post into the chat, or you can come off mute if you'd like as well.
We have a quiet audience today.
All quiet, yeah.
It's pretty cool that Logic apps just glue these services together. And,
yeah. I mean, really, you have two low-code things going, right? There's the low-code or no. Actually, they did no-code today, right? I mean, it's the ServiceNow flows and the Azure Logic apps, leveraging both of those, right? I mean, it takes a shade tree developer like me, right? We can start to glue things together, and make some durable automations, which I think is pretty slick.
Yeah, and for sure, the scenario that if somebody loses his mobile phone, for instance, you can call the service desk and it will be added to ServiceNow, and then somebody needs to pick up the incident and do something manual. That this will complete the workflow. That's pretty cool.
Yep. And if anybody has any thoughts, if anybody has any thoughts, if you think of other scenarios you'd love to see in the future, feel free to send those my way. You can contact me here at my email or hit me on Twitter or whatever else. But I'd love to get some example scenarios, and we can blog those out or have future sessions if there's interest.
All right, yeah, and a lot of people will watch the recording, so for those people, feel free to reach out via the chat or directly to Greg. Thanks again for joining us, Greg, early in the morning.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, team.
See you very soon somewhere in the world. So
that's right. Looking forward to
it together.
That's right.
Too long.
That sounds good.
And thanks for joining, everybody. I will be up in 2 weeks, so join us. And thanks again for our sponsors. And with that, thank you for joining us, and hope to see you next time.
Yep. Thank you.